Hello everyone, I am Reesha and this is for the love of classics. I have never done a Q&A video before, but after reaching 1,500 subscribers, I decided to do one. A couple of weeks ago, I asked you guys to submit questions if you have any. So the first question is by Hannah's Books and she wants to know the story of how I fell in love with English classics. So I had been studying English from a very early age. In Pakistan, we learned to read English alongside Urdu from kindergarten. One of the first classics I read as a kid was The Prince and the Pauper by Mark Twain and The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. But these books did not leave a strong impact on me. Later, I read some of the books by Jane Austen, including Pride and Prejudice, Emma, Persuasion, and I also read Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights. I really fell in love with Jane Austen's writing, but my love for classics began when I discovered BookTube. I found so many booktubers talking about classics. I finally found people talking about books which I had already read. These booktubers were giving recommendations. Other than Jane Austen and the Bronte sisters, I did not know other classic authors. I just started buying these classics recommended by so many people online, and it just opened a new door for me regarding my reading. Palwasha Rahman says, "Congratulations, you deserve it. You have a lovely channel." Her question is, your most favorite Victorian classic of all times, mention only one. It's really hard picking one favorite because I love North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell, I love Far from the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy, and I love Hard Times by Charles Dickens. But if I had to choose one favorite Victorian classic, it would without any doubt be Middlemarch by George Eliot, because it has been the only Victorian classic which has been the most impactful. This book has beautiful writing, it has an amazing story, a great cast of characters, in-depth analysis about human nature. I haven't found a book comparable to Middlemarch by George Eliot yet. So my favorite Victorian classic of all time would definitely be Middlemarch by George Eliot. The third question is, I would love to know what made you start a YouTube channel, if you have a public Goodreads account, and if you have ever read Maurice by E.M. Forster. If you haven't, you definitely should. When I discovered BookTube, there were so many amazing creators from the United Kingdom, the United States, but I could not find a Desi BookTube channel. And since I loved talking about books and there were no other people in my life I could discuss them with, so I thought YouTube would be an amazing place for me to get to know other people with similar book tastes as mine. I could discuss what I gathered from these classics as I read them and share my thoughts with the BookTube community. I do have a Goodreads account. It's always linked in the description, so you can add me there if you want. And no, I have not read Maurice by E.M. Forster. In fact, I have not read a single book by E.M. Forster. I definitely plan to do that. So thank you for the recommendation. The next question is by Maria and she says that, what was the book that made you fall in love with classics? What is the book that has impacted you the most? The book which made me fall in love with classics almost 10 years ago would be Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen and Persuasion by Jane Austen. I read these books over and over again, and I also read retellings of these classics. But after discovering BookTube, the classics which made me fall in love with this genre were The Return of the Native by Thomas Hardy. This was just an amazing introduction to Thomas Hardy. When it comes to Charles Dickens, Little Dorrit did an amazing job for making me fall in love with his works. Her second question is a book which has impacted me the most, and I had to give this question a lot of thought because there have been so many books which have impacted me over my life. So I would share a couple of them. The first one would be A Country Doctor's Notebook by Mikhail Bulgakov. This one impacted me because it is the story about a young doctor and his early experiences in his field of work. So I found this very impactful for me as I was going through a similar phase. A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khalid Hosseini. I do not have a physical copy of that book, but the honesty in his writing and the realism in his book was so close to home that it left a huge impact on me. The next question is, do you consider yourself a fast reader? You read a lot of big books, so I am assuming so. No, I do not consider myself a fast reader at all. I've been reading The Brothers Karamazov for the last month now. Sometimes I feel so frustrated with myself that I can't manage to read more. On a good reading day, I would say I do manage to read 100 pages. For me, I usually read a couple of days and then I don't read anything at all for the next couple of days. So it takes forever for me to finish a book. However, I do feel like an audiobook helps a lot, because if I feel like I'm not particularly in the mood to read that day, I can just listen to the audiobook as I read alongside it. So that really helps when it comes to reading bigger books or more books. I also find it difficult to read multiple books at a time, which I know a lot of people do. So I wouldn't consider myself a fast reader at all. Hannah also asked to share some of my favorite non-English books if I would like to share their titles. I feel so bad because I haven't read many non-English books. I used to read children's books in Urdu when I was younger. However, as an adult, I haven't read many, in fact, any Urdu books. I was gifted one which was an autobiography by my mother. I just read the first 100 pages and for some reason I just never continued reading that book. I did, however, really enjoy reading Urdu poetry. We read a lot of Urdu poetry in school and also short stories, but never novels. I really enjoyed reading poetry by Allama Iqbal. So, Sir Allama Muhammad Iqbal is the national poet of Pakistan. He was a poet, a philosopher, and a barrister of law. I had a book by Allama Iqbal, which was a collection of his poetry books, including Bangidara, Babe Jibril, and Zarb Kalim. So I used to read a lot of his poems and learned a lot of the verses of his poems for fun. I had no clue that Allama Iqbal also wrote 2 prose books in English: The Development of Metaphysics in Persia and The Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam. So I'll try to see if these books are available anywhere. So apart from Allama Iqbal's poetry, I read one more Urdu novel, which was called Labbaik by Mumtaz Mufti. I really enjoyed that book. It was very interesting and beautifully written. The next question is by Hera Zaman, and she wants to know how I met my husband and what is my favorite book. As I've already told you guys, my favorite book is definitely Middlemarch by George Eliot. How I met my husband. Okay. Let me Google what is an arranged. So I had an arranged marriage, and for any of you who do not know, arranged marriage is a type of marital union where the bride and groom are selected by individuals other than the couple themselves, particularly by family members such as the parents. I know this might sound absolutely weird to many of you. Our parents actually met before we did. First time I met him was one day before our engagement. I had a bunch of questions I wanted to ask him before I made up my mind. And once we got engaged, I got to know him better. And Alhamdulillah, I'm very happy now. The last question is by Rida Gul, and she wants to know if there are any classic books which I would like to recommend for beginners that are not complex and are easy to read and enjoyable. When it comes to classics, it has so many sub-genres of books. So if you like thrillers and mystery novels, a classic I would recommend would be Frankenstein by Mary Shelley or Dracula by Bram Stoker. If you like family drama and romance, I would suggest North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell or Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte, because these books were shorter and had simpler language. I would definitely make another video about classic recommendations for beginners because I'm just sharing these books as they pop up in my head. So that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I would love to do another one of these if you are interested, and I'm going to see you all in my next video very soon. Bye.